Please, you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Before discussing the specifics of the bill, I think it's important to note the background to the fisheries penalty point system. Just over a year ago, the Taoiseach, then acting Minister for the Marine, signed a new system into law without consulting the sector. It was the fourth attempt to bring in such a system after High Court rulings in favour of the fishing sector and the Dáil voting down its introduction in 2018. The entire issue was mired in controversy before it even began. The lack of engagement with those affected is not only disrespectful, but straight away creates hostility to a system that is supposed to be about ensuring better practice. The disregard for fishers and coastal communities further deteriorates the relationship between the department and the sector. Last year, many of us in opposition pointed out the inherent flaws in the government's penalty point system. It lacks due process. Points can be issued on a balance of probability, which is a worrying threshold that has no place in any state regulatory process. And then the right of appeal to the High Court is very limited, and in the case of a successful appeal, the penalty points would still remain on a licence. The system seems intentionally hostile by design. Our coastal and island communities deserve better. The fishing sector should be central to creating a viable and fair process. The only way successful and progressive policies can be developed is in genuine partnership with the communities and the businesses affected. Minister, this is all incredibly frustrating because a larger part of the opposition to this new system is entirely of the government's making. A means of regulating the sector and reprimanding bad practices could have been welcomed as a means for rewarding the good work of most of the sector, but instead we have this mess. In relation to the bill, there are a number of points I would like to raise. Firstly, the Minister emphasised yesterday that Ireland is required to implement a point system urgently as we are subject to EU infringement proceedings and the related financial penalties. This type of rationale is deployed by the government too regularly to justify bad policy. We are presented with a flawed system and told we have to pass it as soon as possible. This type of approach just cannot be used to vindicate unacceptable legislation. We were due to have a system in place by the 1st of January 2012. It is successive governments and the Department of the Marine that have failed to do this, not fishing communities in this House. There was no mention of these failures over many years by the Minister yesterday, which leaves me with little confidence that any lessons have been learned. Secondly, a key problem with this system, reflected in numerous submissions from the sector and in the Oireachtas Committee's report, is that the threshold of proof required is based on a balance of probabilities rather than the usual standard of culpability beyond reasonable doubt. This just goes against normative principles of justice and creates a structure with too much scope for arbitrary and inconsistent rulings. Not only is this morally questionable, but it just undermines the entire system. This key issue will have to be addressed. Next is a master or skipper can only appeal the High Court on a matter of law, not on the substance of the case, which is an extraordinary limitation on an individual's access to justice. Related to this is a situation whereby if a master is found innocent of the alleged breaches in court, the penalty points applied under the legislation would not be deleted. How can the government justify that position? It's just unbelievable. What is the rationale for that nonsensical measure? Fourthly, the sector has expressed concern over the potential for inconsistencies between the application of penalty points to EU and non-EU vessels. As it stands, points assigned to a master who is not an Irish citizen will be notified to the authorities of the relevant member state. However, ambiguity exists concerning infringements by fishing masters of non-EU states, including the UK. This lack of clarity means that different masters, according to their nationality, could have different regulatory burdens. Again, this type of variability undercuts any faith in the system. Next, the absence of any reference to weighing fishery products in the bill is worrying. This is a major issue raised by the sector's representatives, which are seeking the reinstatement of in-factory weighing. There are difficulties around the practicalities of the current system and its effectiveness. The Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marine highlight this in its report, but the bill does not address it. This omission can be seen as an indication of a government and department out of touch with the realities on the ground. Finally, under EU regulation, the Minister has considerable scope in implementing a penalty points process. I'm seeking that the Minister would use this to produce a system that is based on natural justice and due process, and takes on board the many suggestions made by the sector. I think we're all in agreement that there needs to be a system in place to ensure compliance with fisheries regulations. We should promote best practices through a fair and transparent enforcement approach, and at the moment the bill is far from that. I think Minister, when we're on the subject of inadequate consultation processes from the department, it is important to note that that is the reason that the new law in relation to pair trawling within the 6 mile nautical zone was overturned, simply because there wasn't adequate consultation from the department. And I would urge you to reinstate that law with the adequate consultation as soon as possible. Government representatives have said in here today as well that the inshore sector have been neglected, and I have to say I couldn't agree more. We heard an awful lot about the unfair deal that Ireland got in terms of the quota, and I completely agree with all of that, but something that didn't get enough attention is the fact that the Minister is in charge of distributing the national quota, and 2% of that went to the inshore fisheries sector. As the vast majority of people working in the sector, it is the vast majority of vessels in the sector, and it is the kind of sustainable fishing that we should all be getting behind. Instead, 98% of our national quota has gone to roughly around 50 boats, providing far less employment, practising way less sustainable types of practices, and that really needs to be addressed, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Kearns.